In this possibly terminal phase of human existence, democracy and freedom are more than values to be treasured. They may well be essential to survival. Noam Chomsky. Welcome to the Left Library, the home of simple political theory. Today, we're exploring Noam Chomsky's influential work, Hegemony or Survival: America's Quest for Global Dominance. Published in 2003, this book offers a critical analysis of US foreign policy and its implications for global peace and security. Noam Chomsky, a renowned linguist, philosopher, and political activist, has been a vocal critic of US foreign policy for decades. In Hegemony or Survival, he argues that the United States' pursuit of global dominance poses significant risks to humanity's future. The book examines the historical and contemporary actions of the US government, highlighting how its quest for hegemony endangers both democracy and survival on a global scale. Chomsky argues that the United States has consistently sought to maintain and expand its global dominance through military, economic, and political means. This pursuit of hegemony is rooted in a long history of imperial ambitions, where the US has intervened in the affairs of other nations to protect its interests. The United States, in the service of its imperial ambitions, has been willing to resort to any means necessary to achieve its goals, including the use of military force, economic coercion, and political manipulation. Chomsky highlights numerous examples of US interventions, from the overthrow of democratically elected governments in Latin America to military invasions in the Middle East. He argues that these actions are not anomalies, but part of a consistent strategy to assert American dominance and control over global resources and markets. He provides a detailed history of US interventions, such as the CIA-led coups in Iran, 1953, and Guatemala, 1954, the Vietnam War, and support of authoritarian regimes in Latin America during the Cold War. Chomsky emphasizes how these interventions were often justified under the guise of promoting democracy and combating communism, but were primarily motivated by economic and strategic interests. A significant focus of the book is the US doctrine of preemptive war, which was prominently articulated during the George W. Bush administration. This doctrine justifies the use of military force to neutralize perceived threats before they can materialize, often based on dubious evidence. The doctrine of preemptive war is a radical departure from traditional principles of international law and poses a grave threat to global peace and stability. Chomsky critiques the preemptive war doctrine for its potential to provoke conflicts and destabilize regions. He cites the invasion of Iraq in 2003 as a prime example, where the US launched a war based on false claims of weapons of mass destruction, leading to widespread destruction and long-term instability in the region. He discusses how the preemptive war doctrine undermines international law and sets a dangerous precedent for other nations. By acting unilaterally and without the backing of the United Nations, the US erodes the principles of collective security and international cooperation, increasing the likelihood of future conflicts. Chomsky also examines the economic dimensions of US hegemony, particularly the promotion of neoliberal policies that favor corporate interests and free market capitalism. These policies often come at the expense of social welfare and economic justice, both domestically and internationally. Neoliberalism, championed by the United States, has led to the concentration of wealth and power in the hands of a few, while exacerbating poverty and inequality for the many. He discusses how international financial institutions, like the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, often influenced by US interests, impose structural adjustment programs on developing countries, These programs typically demand austerity measures, privatization of public assets, and deregulation, the neoliberal triad of policies, which has been shown to undermine local economies and exacerbate social inequalities. Chomsky details the impacts of these policies, citing specific cases such as the debt crisis in Latin America during the 1980s and the economic collapse in Argentina in the early 2000s. He explains how these neoliberal reforms often lead to economic dependency, social unrest, and environmental degradation, as countries are forced to prioritize debt repayment and market reforms over the needs of their populations. Chomsky is well known for his critique of the role of media in shaping public perception and opinion. In Hegemony or Survival, he explores how mainstream media in the United States often serve as instruments of state and corporate propaganda, promoting narratives that support US foreign policy objectives. The media play a crucial role in manufacturing consent, shaping public opinion to align with the interests of the powerful. Chomsky argues that media outlets owned by large corporations with vested interests frequently present biased and selective coverage that downplays or ignores the negative consequences of US actions abroad. He illustrates this with examples of media coverage of wars, economic policies, and international relations, showing how dissenting voices are marginalized or silenced. He discusses the mechanisms of media control, including the concentration of media ownership, the reliance on government and corporate sources, and the use of framing and agenda-setting techniques. Chomsky emphasizes the importance of independent media and alternative information sources in providing a more accurate and critical perspective on global events. A critical aspect of Chomsky's analysis is the impact of US policies on the environment. He argues that the relentless pursuit of economic growth and resource extraction, driven by corporate interests and supported by government policies, poses a severe threat to ecological sustainability and human survival. The environmental consequences of unchecked capitalist expansion and US policies are catastrophic, threatening the very survival of life on Earth. Chomsky highlights the refusal of the US government to take meaningful action on climate change, despite overwhelming scientific evidence of its dangers. He critiques the influence of the fossil fuel industry on US politics, which leads to policies that favor short-term profits over long-term environmental health. He provides detailed examples of environmental degradation caused by US policies, such as deforestation, pollution, and the exploitation of natural resources. Chomsky argues that addressing environmental challenges requires a fundamental shift in priorities, moving away from profit-driven growth towards sustainable development and ecological stewardship. In the face of US hegemony, Chomsky advocates for global resistance and solidarity among oppressed peoples. He emphasizes the importance of grassroots movements, international cooperation, and the pursuit of alternative models of social and economic organization. To challenge the destructive hegemony of the United States, it is essential to build strong, interconnected movements that advocate for peace, justice, and environmental sustainability. Chomsky discusses various movements and organizations that have successfully resisted US policies and neoliberalism, from anti-war protests to indigenous struggles for land and rights. He calls for the creation of a more equitable global order based on principles of democracy, human rights, and ecological stewardship. He highlights examples of successful resistance, such as the Zapatista uprising in Mexico, the global justice movement against the World Trade Organization, and environmental activism against corporate exploitation. Chomsky underscores the importance of solidarity and cooperation among diverse movements to create a unified front against hegemonic power. Noam Chomsky's hegemony or survival remains highly relevant in understanding contemporary global politics. The themes he explores, such as imperialism, neoliberalism, media manipulation, and environmental destruction, continue to shape the world today. Chomsky's analysis provides a critical framework for examining the actions of powerful states and the importance of resistance and solidarity in the struggle for a just and sustainable future. Chomsky's critique encourages readers to question the dominant narratives presented by governments and media, to understand the underlying motivations of US foreign policy, and to recognize the interconnectedness of global struggles for justice and survival. In Hegemony or Survival, Noam Chomsky offers a powerful critique of US foreign policy and its implications for global peace and security. His work challenges us to rethink the nature of power and resistance in the modern world, and to consider the urgent need for alternative models of political and economic organization. By understanding Chomsky's analysis, we can better advocate for a world that prioritizes democracy, justice, and ecological sustainability. Thank you for watching the Left Library. If you have enjoyed, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe for more simplified insights into political philosophy, political economy, and political science. Let's continue to learn and grow together.